Оккульт просвет.
Hello, everyone, and introduce my guest. This is Dave Li or David Lee. But as I remember, everybody is calling you Dave.
Yeah.
So, how are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
Yeah, me too. I think that spring has come kind of. It's still cold, but my beloved seagulls came back, so it started to.
Oh,
It's gonna be fun again and very loud in my village. But anyway, so I've been asking my followers on my channel who would they be interested into, and I was talking about you as well and your practice, and I have to have this kind of introduction that Dave was actually there when IoT also was established, and that's cultist with the deep and very long history in occult, and especially in chaos magic and Discordianism, isn't it?
sure. Yes. Yeah. Chaos magic, Scordianism, energy magic, runes. Those are my main sort of areas.
And I think the runes are one of the things maybe I wanted to talk today because I mean you practice in runes quite often inside the chaos magic paradigm, which is for me particularly interesting because I'm into Nordic tradition myself a lot, and I know a lot of my followers also are, and that's interesting for me because as I was uh, learning myself and what I hear from other practitioners, Nordic tradition is pretty strict, and yet you manage to make it more, I would say, fluid and working in a chaos magic paradigm. Do you have any ideas how to explain it to my followers?
Well, you say it's very strict, but it's I think it well, the runes certainly, leaving aside the wider issues of the tradition, certainly the runes they're very compact. It's like saying, this is a single symbol and it has this range of meanings. Combine it with another symbol and it narrows those meanings down. You've got a bind rule and it makes it more specific and so on. So you've got something which is, I think, ideally technically suited to the way that a lot of chaos magicians think. I mean, for me, I discovered chaos magic before I discovered runes. I came into chaos magic in the late 1970s as something which, this is the kind of an approach to magic that actually works for me. And it was many years later that I started studying the runes. So initially I came to them from the attitude of a chaos magic practitioner. So I suppose I would say things like that. But it does seem to me that they're a remarkably flexible and modular kind of magical scheme.
And that's very I would say against what I kind of learned, but I totally agree with you as a practitioner. But my history with runic tradition and Nordic tradition in general has been quite, I mean, my teachers and when I came across, that's why exactly I actually stepped back from runic tradition because it was too strict for me. And then I found out again, I like rediscovered runes for me again, coming to IoT and learning that I can do it my own way actually. It still
When you
works.
say it was too strict for you, do you mean that your teachers said you had to do spells in a certain way with certain rituals and so?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
all kind of offerings, for instance, you have to draw runes that way or that way. Sometimes it even goes like certain colors for certain rules or runes, or were strict rules of practicing with deities from Nordic tradition.
Okay. I mean, that sounds to me like somebody's made something close to a religion out of the Nordic
I would
tradition.
say so, and that's exactly what I can. Okay, maybe it's not for me. And anyway, they didn't declare themselves like Asatru or Vanatru, so nothing like that. But still, and then I think that's kind of an idea still out there. When I come across some Nordic tradition, they say like, if you don't do that, then I don't know, Odin or Thor will come and I don't know, punish you or something like that. And yeah, so did you meet that kind of restrictions on your journey with runes?
Not really, no, because I suppose I was influenced in my. I mean, when I came into the IoT in the, or back into the IoT after a few years away in the early '90s, and got to know people in the IoT better than I had before. Got to know more people. There were some people working with runes, and so I was aware of that. But it was a few years after that that I started to work with them myself. And my influence was largely Ian Reid and Ingrid Fisher, who were the section heads of the IoT in UK, in Britain, from 91 for a few years, 1991 for a few years after that. And they were also involved with the Rune Guild. And some of the workings that that Ian introduced interested me, and I went to my first IoT World meeting in 1991 in Burg-Lockenhaus in Austria, and there were some people introducing runic workings there. So my introduction to it was kind of like almost within the frame of the chaos magic world. Although I mean, all right, Ingrid died a few years ago, but Ian's still around, and he is still very much a magician in the Northern tradition and a chaos magician, I would say. And so I was kind of led into it through a very different thing. The source books that we tended to use at that time that are still influential were by Edred Thorson. He wrote a book back in ages ago, maybe 1980.
He's still, I would say, he's quite a name still, also in Russian runic traditions. Yeah.
Well, you've got, his early book on runic magic, Futhark, is very much a case of take this scheme and use it to do magic. Here's how to use it to do magic. And there's a number of suggested workings in there, but it's certainly not you must do it this way by and large. And I think one of the things that was appealing about Thorson is that, he's a magician. He talks like a magician, but he's got enough academic background to actually kind of read the old languages, understand some of the old ideas and texts for himself. And so he brings a fresh eye to it that isn't based on something somebody's made up. All right, I mean, obviously he made things up as well, and he admits it, but it's it opens it up and turns it into something more like a technical resource for magicians.
Yes, but how would you describe exactly this place where in your practice runes and chaos magic merge? How exactly does it look?
Well, I would give examples. If I'm making something like a servitor, sometimes just a basic spell, but certainly with something like a servitor, you decide what you want it to do. So it's got a sort of core of instructions, and those are very easy to encode in runes usually. You can take 2 or 3 or 4 runes and make a bind rune, and you've got a very, very specific meaning with all of those 2 or 3 or 4 powers brought into alignment. And I think that is very much a chaos magic way of working with runes. Also, I like using collage and cut up as magical techniques, and I've done that quite a bit with runes as well. There's some examples in my last book, Primordial Chaos, from some of my early chaos magic runic spells, where I will have, for instance, done some sort of cut up of some script that's turned it into nonsense, so it's become like sigilized, but then produce. I mean, in one case, it was a T-wise rune made from these scripts. So that's another way of overlapping those ideas.
Yeah, and also you use a lot of incense, and that's also a big part. And I mean, when we did the practice together, so with combination like incense and runes, also for me was a new thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't imagine that there's much, we're not talking. I'd imagine that a runic magician 1,000 years ago may well not, probably wouldn't have used incense. But then again, when you look at the consistency of practice or the range of practice, I think our runic ancestors were highly pragmatic. I think that what you've got there is you've got a system which was cobbled together by very intelligent wizards from, let's say, the Etruscan alphabet or some other Southern European alphabet that was then that turned into a magical scheme. So it was made up by someone who was a very original magical thinker and had managed to produce this beautifully powerful system. So when you when you unpack it, you can, I think it's consistent with what I see as the mentality of magicians of that era, of that tradition, that we do what we want with it, that we add what we want. The incense thing, that's a personal thing. I've just always loved scent and smells. When I was a little kid, I had a garden, and in June, July, I can remember that time of year as being the smell of honeysuckle blossoms. And then, I was never religious, and my family weren't particularly religious, but occasionally we had to go to church for some ceremony, like a wedding or funeral or something. And it was the smell of the incense just blew my mind. It was just like, wow, I just love that. And, the first time I went to a a sort of music festival, and there was a stall selling incense, I bought some and things like that. It's just, so as soon as I got into magic, I started working out how to make my own incenses.
Yeah, I have your cow's oil.
Oh yes, oils. Yeah.
I use it quite often. I still love it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I use it quite often, and I have a lot of your also dry incense, but I don't have this burner actually. And I mean, if I will start it, my fire alarm is too sensitive for that, so I need to use it
Yes,
somewhere.
yeah, of course.
Yeah. But yeah, oils, that's really my passion, and so I use it a lot. But is it secret recipe or
That which one's that?
cow's power? Cow's power.
8 chaos powers. Yeah, it's 8 different oils attributed to the, the 8 colors of magic or planets in the older tradition. So, like for instance, for sun, there's some orange oil and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, so I mean, I understand that how you use oils and everything, but can you please a little bit in a few words, what are oils in the magical practice? I mean, I know there is a huge tradition of it and everything, and I use it also to enhance my practices. But like, what are they for you? The smells and incense. How do you take it? How is it enhancing your practice?
Yeah, I burn incense fairly often. Um, More with when I'm doing group work, because I think it helps to get everybody into the same vibe, as it were. When you've got an incense burning, everybody can tune into that. It's one of the things that holds it together, but also sometimes in solitary practice. Each set of correspondences. So, like for instance, I said I used orange for the sun or yellow aspect of 8 chaos powers, and something that's bright and uplifting, something that produces that association. There may also be a physiological effect, something that actually directly affects on the body. So another good oil for sun is, of course, frankincense. And frankincense causes your breathing to deepen. Frankincense and pine and some other oils produce a sort of expansion.
Those are exactly 2 oils, yours and frankincense on my altar.
Yeah. Great. So you're getting a sort of an uplifting effect from frankincense. So so there's a direct physiological effect. There's also the association of just, oh, that's a smell that makes me feel, or that's a dark, heavy smell for something like Saturn or something that's just a bit too sharp for Mars. It's kind of all these associations help build up the right feeling for a working.
For me, it's always, what do you think more important, your personal association or all these tables of correspondence? Because for me, tables of correspondence are quite often, I don't use them. I mean, like in Liber 777 or like Skinner tables and so on. I don't sometimes, I mean, I know it's like kind of a base of Western occult tradition and so on, but I don't know. I can't use them really. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I quite like them, but I don't think there's enough correspondences to make a full range of incenses. If you look at Crowley's 777, which of course he inherited from Alan Bennett, and Alan Bennett cobbled it together largely from Cornelius Agrippa a few centuries before. So it's kind of like there's a lineage of
Yeah.
attributions there. And I think they can be useful, but they're too rigid, really. You've got to find your own. So for instance, and it's not hard to do that. Just work with something and get the once you've got the feeling of what Jupiter is, then things that are Jupiter will start to appear to you. You know, for instance, there's some quite obscure attributions for Jupiter, like grains of paradise and things like that. But in fact, quite common things can work very well, like cardamom, green cardamom that's used in Indian cookery. That's I think that's a great Jupiter aroma. So that'd be a personal one. So my attitude to it's inclusive. So when I did my book on magical incenses, I put all of the correspondences from Crowley that made any sense to me in there, but I added a load more as well, so people can use it as a menu of possible correspondence.
Yeah, I think I kind of sometimes check correspondences that it's more as some direction for me.
Yeah.
But quite often it goes like it's sometimes it, at least that's with my background, the strict rules again.
Mm.
And yeah, so I think a lot of my practice is built on protest to that.
Yeah, fair
So
enough. Fair enough.
that's how I end up in IoT, I guess.
I suppose it's like it wouldn't have occurred to me to burn bay leaves of bay laurel, that herb that's used in cooking. It wouldn't have occurred to me that that is a really good solar herb, a really good sun herb when you burn it in incense. And it is, and it just wouldn't have occurred to me unless I'd read that in tables of correspondences. So they have been useful to me.
Yeah, so they can give you some ideas, they can direct you somewhere.
Yeah.
But if you practice it as slightly different, it doesn't mean that you make some huge mistake and now all your ritual is gonna ruin or harm you or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what
Not
I mean.
usually, no.
Absolutely. So, and you said you are part of a runic guild, and you also do not have that much rules there, like this follow certain tradition. It's also like a flow for runic guild. I mean, is it?
Yeah, the Rune Guild. Yes, it's an organization which is it's quite traditional in some ways. So, you know, it does have a hierarchy. You join as a learner, and or you can hang around the edges of it as an associate and, you know, pay a small fee for that, or you can just join properly as a learner if you can find a master who will teach you, who will mentor you. And so there's a scheme of learners, fellows, and masters. So it is quite traditional, hierarchical in that respect. But you find a master if you can find a master you can resonate with, who's got the time and the desire to mentor you. There's no money involved in the transaction. Then they will take you on and you start your path, and it will take a few years to work through the 9 doors of Midgard, which is Edred Thorson's text for the Rune Guild. And the overall magical frame, I would say, is basically self-initiation. You do loads of work and the initiations occur spontaneously. Nobody formally initiates you. When you become a fellow or master, it's that you're recognized as such, not that you're made into one. And so, yeah, it's a self-initiation with support from a master.
Okay,
Is the
that
structure.
sounds really nice. So that's like also very free journey anyway. It's not so super strict rules or anything.
It's the 9 doors of Midgard is a very detailed program, and you are supposed to work through it, although there are flexibilities built into it. Like, for instance, if you've never done any work with runes before, you're advised to do, I think it's take the Elder Food Arc and do 3 days per rune. I can't remember offhand. It might even be 9 days per rune. But I mean, I'd already worked with them by the time I got that far, so I just did fewer fewer days per rune. And also, if you've never done any meditation, you're supposed to do sort of certain sitting meditation type exercises. But I've done years of meditation, so I just, I can fast forward through that part of it. So yeah, it's got some flexibility built in.
Do you work with deities in Nordic tradition?
You can do.
But do you personally? Do you do?
Not very much. No, I don't work with many deities anyway. I do. Certain deities have come into my life, and I'll respect that, and I'll work with them. But and everyone I work with, the relationship is different. So in the Rune Guild, the only deity I guess I work with closely is Woden or Odin, because I see Woden as an archetype of my magical self, in a certain sense. It's an archetypal form of my own magical self, so that it's not me in any sense whatsoever, but it's also not completely separate from me. There's an archetypal connection, Woden being the magician. So that's how that works for me. So sometimes, on a few occasions, I've had a situation where it feels like the god is kind of separate or merged with me, and there's some actual, that I'm maybe overshadowed by the god and working under the god's direction. But that's been rare. Normally, I think of it as me reaching up through consciousness and meeting Woden to some extent through that.
Mm-hmm. And Woden is like your main, if you work with any deities, or?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think of Woden as being what in voodoo they've got an expression called maître de tête, master of the head. So when you become an initiate, you realize that one of the loa, one of the gods of voodoo, is your natural leader of your head, the natural. And that's how I see Woden. I see Woden as my master of my head. He is just the natural the natural match for me in the Norse pantheon, much more so than Thor or Frey or Freya or any of the other deities.
Mm-hmm. Well, in chaos magic, you use kind of mostly paradigms, yes. So, I mean, from that point of view, so what your take on deities? What is it for you in general?
Well, like I say, I don't work a great deal with deities. Some deities have come into my life, and I work with them. I read a bit way back at the beginning of my magical path, about 40 something years ago. I read a book about voodoo and Maya Deren's Divine Horseman, and as a result, I started to get apparent appearances, as it were, of Papa Gede, Papa Legba, that suite of gods. And once I had, just spontaneously, Papa Gede started turning up when I took psychedelics back in the 1990s, and on acid on one occasion and on DMT on another. He was there, and in a very sort of benign advisory sort of faculty. But when I went back to work with him, it was as if he was saying, no need, no need for any formal work. There's just some contact between us, but I'm not telling you what. It's like, it was a bit like that. So occasionally come into my life. A friend of mine went to live in Mexico for a few years, and when he came back, he brought me this as a gift, this statue of La Santa Muerte. And I thought, wow, I didn't know anything about Santa Muerte at the time. So I started looking into her and doing some devotions and working. But again, it was kind of like, that spirit is there, and I can work with that spirit to some extent, but it's like, it's not my main thing. And when I tried working more, just to see whether I wasn't doing enough and I should be doing more, when I tried doing more, it's just like blank. It's just not there. So I have gods that wander into my life, and from time to time. But yeah.
But they don't demand to do any.
No, there's no sort of strict demand to do any devotion, even though I've attempted that, and it's been like, so what kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say for me also. I mean, no, I do a lot work with deities, but no devotion, no this specific altar work or offering or specific worshiping or anything like that. Moreover, I was even denied kind of to do that. So yes, we do totally different ways. So let's just talk and continue and like develop some projects together, kind of like that.
Mm.
But you said you went into voodoo quite deep. I didn't know about that. You practice voodoo also. Do you?
Well, no, not that deeply. I mean, I'm not an initiate of any of the lineages, but I read a little bit about it in that book back in the day, and then in sometime in the 1980s, I got given a copy of Michael Bertio's Voodoo Gnostic workbook. So I worked with that for a while, and there's a lot of stuff in there. It's like a sort of compendium of lots of different magical styles, and some of that worked for me, but I still wouldn't say that I've gone that deep into it.
What's your main focus of work, magical work now?
My main focus is, so it's difficult to pin it down to a single thing, but there's certainly a lot of energy work in there. I use energy breathing, energy breath work to produce a sense of energy, of chi, of prana, of atvam. That's sort of, the energy of life. And I use that in my magic quite a bit. I work with egregores. I like the idea of making something that is more complex than a servitor, that's a sensitive system that can make decisions, that can make judgment calls.
Can you please describe how do you perceive egregore?
How
do you perceive it? What is egregore for you?
It's a spirit that is derived from a group mind, from a group work. So, for instance, let's see if I can think of an example. There's probably a few just hanging around right here. I can find the right ones. Anyway, you build something like a servitor, so that you decide the general kind of task that this entity has, and then you create it in a group, so that there's a lot of chaotic input. You've got to have chaos in there. It's not something that's just going to follow instructions. So with a normal servitor, it's like, go and, I don't know, find me somewhere to live. And when it's done that, it switches off. So it just goes out, does something, and switches off.
So servitor doesn't have any like consciousness, in your opinion?
That's or it's very, very low level of consciousness. It's more like a little machine. Whereas an egregore entity is something else. It's something that is that can make judgment calls. When we Kawa Pohr, that's one that I can use as an example because we released that into the world over 20 years ago.
Yes.
We formed that as a healing servitor in 1993, I think.
I will put then link to the Kawa Pohr in the description.
Oh, great, good idea. Yeah, there's a few essays about it, partly written by me and some other people on the IoT British Isles blog. And so we formed it in 1993. Then in 95, we had a larger group at a world meeting, found a name and a sigil for it, and it just took off from there. It started to become more powerful, and it definitely had a sort of shape-shifting quality, such that it would, if you sent it to help somebody, it would approach them in a way which made them feel comfortable.
But is it still a servitor, or over the years it turned like into egregore?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that really taught me about how servitors can evolve into egregores. If you take a servitor you've been using and you give it to other people, then it will make it more powerful. But it's still not an egregore in the sense I use it. It has to be created by a group. It has to have that extra chaos in it so that it can make decisions.
So can you please elaborate it? Like, how do you make egregore? It's I think it's a very interesting topic. I don't think I ever had.
Okay. I'm
I
trying
mean,
to
I've been participating in the creation of egregore with you. But I want to, like, from your point, like, how is it? How do you describe it and explain to my
yeah.
viewers on my channel?
Well, you have to decide what the basic parameters are, what you want it to do, and any symbols you're using, such as runes, for instance, or sigils or colors or whatever you're using. And you might want to make a material base for it, although quite often you can do without one for an egregore because it's spread across, it's there in the consciousness of a lot of people. So it exists, it exists on a number of levels. So you design it, that's the design process. And then you get together and you do something which has got some chaotic elements. So you may use just a very chaotic ritual. You may use something like action painting, splashing paint around. You may use something like cut up or collage using.
What does it give? Chaotic element. What
Sorry?
does it? What function does it serve? The chaotic element.
Because it actually introduces chaos into the entity so that it can, degrees, the idea of degrees of freedom. An ordinary servitor, go out and get me a job, go out and get me a new place to live. That's got no degrees of freedom. Basically, it's just like, do this, do this, do this until it works and then close down. Whereas you want, with an egregore entity, you want something that's got those extra degrees of freedom. It's capable of making a decision. It can take a judgment call. And that is why you put the chaos in there. And it can, like I say, it can be from, cut up collage, action painting, dice rolls, anything that generates a feeling of randomness. So there's a sort of space inside it where it can make decisions.
Yeah, one time we had with you some chaos dance with some dubstep music and this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, like this. So also to spread it into the wall. So like what you use instrument to with water, for instance, like last time. When
Sorry, what was
you
the
use
question?
you use that idea to spread this energy over the world. So you gave us little bottles with water, so we can.
Yeah.
So, for instance, what does it serve? So but with water, so it's connected all over. How does it?
Yeah, well, that water that came from. There was a bit of history behind that water in that particular working. That it was somebody gave. We did this working which turned this bottle of water into a nano computer, so that all the sort of like water molecules became part of a really super computer. That was used for another spell, but at the end of it, everybody was given a bottle of that water and told that if you put that water into other water, it will turn that water into a supercomputer. And the egregore in question was to do with disinformation and to do with online work. So it seemed apt that there was a computer analogy there. I don't think it was necessarily the best analogy, but it worked. It certainly worked to some extent. I would now be inclined just to put it directly into electronic networks. But yeah.
If you would, let's say, suggest making an egregore who will protect social circle, where would you start?
Your social circle.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, write down something that agree on us the basic intention of the egregore, such that it might be members of such and such group are always safe, always protected. Don't put, be careful how you word it. Of course, it's not like this entity will always protect people, in which case, of course, it may make trouble to protect them from. So you'd have to be careful how you word it. And then decide what symbols you're going to use. So, for instance, you could break that statement down into a sigil, to, your single glyph.
And if I want to, but if I have a servitor, but if I want to turn it into a egregore.
Okay. Well, I would take it, work with a group of people and expand it and sort of open up its structure so that it can take more in. We kind of did that with, we did a spell in 2018, 2017, something like that. So that, and the intention of the spell was that weapons of mass destruction are never used. And there's 5 runes that made up the spell. And we did it at a big Discordian event, a sort of mad party that went on all day. So there was a lot of people there, and we had a sigil on the floor done in colored powders, and people danced over it. Special music we created, and that dispersed it. And then years later, I thought, well, why not turn that into something more permanent? So instead of a spell, it was upgraded to a servitor, and then we upgraded it to an egregore entity by calling a group meeting where we re-instructed it, kind of thing, and added another level of chaos to it. But it had already got a level of chaos to it because of it had been created in a group of about 40 people with a lot of craziness going on. So something like that.
Yeah. How high level of craziness should be there? Well,
as much as you want, yeah.
Yes. So this is again. So if I want to extend, upgrade servitor, so I need to add some element of chaos, so it will find their power to have a free will or like decision making possibilities.
Yeah. Because you're making it. You think of it as you're making it more conscious. You're kind of like the ritual becomes like, a birthing of something that's more conscious out of something that was very restricted.
Yes, interesting. And so this is, you said we started this to discuss that for you it's one of the main focus now of work.
Well, it's only when I'm working with other people, but it's just one of my main interests at the moment. What else? Yeah, it's difficult to pin down my
But
interest.
anyway, it's a group work always, and I mean, so what is it for you there? Because this is also quite an interesting subject to discuss. So you prefer to have a group practices, or?
I do both. I mean, I've got my own solitary practices, but I do like group work. I think group work is, you've got that group mind effect. Everything is amplified. And in some ways, it makes things a bit more difficult because you don't have the sheer simplicity of working on your own, but it makes things more powerful too.
Yes, for me, it's always a little bit challenging to work in a groups, even though I was always searching for a group to work with. But still, it's also quite sometime a discussion in on my channel, like whether it's more important for your own personal growth to be a this solitary powerful magician, or you have to have some kind of a group. You have to do, and what is it also about society, like does musician need to put their, I would say, like input impact on the society, or no, if you do this magic path then you have to be like on your own and develop into some higher form of yourself or something like that.
Yeah,
it's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from here. It's like the kind of antinomian aspect of magic. They're just standing out on your own. Yes, there is that. When you come into magic, you've got to walk a line which is fairly close to what is called insane. Because, magical thinking, the idea that there's a connection between our consciousness and the world around us, is listed in the DSM as a symptom of insanity. That is one of the things they look for in crazy people. So if you do magic, if you live a magical life, you are by mainstream definition insane. So you're walking you're walking a potentially dangerous path always, and you have to know that. And I think it actually helps in 2 different ways if you're with a group of people in a community, not necessarily always in a group, but in some sort of community where you can talk about these things. One, you realize that you are as weird as you need to be because you're with other people who are very weird, but also it grounds you more so that you are less likely to slip over into becoming crazy in the dysfunctional sense. And there's absolutely no doubt about it. You know, a lot of people in the magical world do become crazy in the dysfunctional sense. I've seen it happen a few times. And I think the main guard against that is a good community.
Okay, but isn't also what I think discussion come on my channel is like about your will. So it's like there is a lot of these ideas that if you're a magician, you have to be always on your own willpower, and then you have to manifest your will and so on. And the society sometimes recognized, and if you lean on the social society, sometimes it's recognized as weakness. You didn't mean that.
I think, yeah, there's sort of, this is a really complex topic. I mean, I agree with you up to a point, but I think also there's an element of dysfunctionality about some people's idea of the will. They're sort of rigid, you know. That's all it is. It's just like, you know, it's very macho. And I think ultimately it can be very stupid, that kind of thing. It can become so inflexible that it's a genuine form of insanity, you know, because the person has just cast themselves into a rigid straitjacket of believing they're one particular kind of thing. I mean, I think that if you go inside yourself, if you meditate regularly, you'll discover that you probably have no idea what the core of your being is. It doesn't really have any label that can stick to it. I won't say there's absolutely no self. I'm not a Buddhist, but I also don't think that the self we normally think we have and that the will we normally think we have, I think is just, it's contextual. It's an illusion in some contexts and it's relevant in others. And I think you need to have that a little bit of distance from the idea of the will. Your will to live your own life as you wish, yes, definitely. And that will, if that conflicts with what's expected of you socially, then that is another complex thing. Obviously, if you're going around hurting people, then somebody needs to stamp you down and lock you up. But if you're just trying to live your life as an individual, as someone to live their life and do what they need to do and to fulfill your will as you feel it, then yes, you've a perfect right to do that. And yes, you do need a strong magical will. See what I mean? It's so complex. I'm kind of agreeing with you and thinking the emphasis.
I'm asking you, it doesn't mean that I actually on that side of you have to be alone and individual. No, I like to work in, I have to admit that in the beginning maybe of my magical journey, I kind of shared these ideas of strong individuality and everything, but with time, no, I disagree. You have to have a society, you have to have your circle, you can people you can lean on, and that's exactly what for me magic where can magic can actually thrive. Like if you just lock it on yourself, that I don't understand what's the point in that then.
Yeah, I mean you have to be able to be, you have to be able to flow into different situations if you're a magician, I think. So that if you need to go out, if you've got a job out in the normal world of horrors, then you know you go out and you're a lawyer or a bar attendant or a physicist or whatever for so many hours a day, and you have to be a certain kind of, you have to produce a certain kind of persona, a certain mask to be able to get through that without burning out, you know, to be able to get through that and be as true to yourself as possible. But obviously you can't be a completely crazy wild magician in a lot of jobs, and you may even have to keep it secret that you're a magician, if you know, otherwise people may not trust you because they don't understand, or they might be frightened or something. So
unless magic is actually your main job.
So you have to have different masks for different contexts, different personas, I think.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, just I am trying to also ask you questions which are relevant to discussions on my channel. And it's not necessary that I share these ideas, but it's just like
Sure.
that is what I'm usually asked, and I want to share different perspectives from magicians from different cultures. Because do you know anything about like Russian magical traditions or Russian speaking?
No, quite honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like super something super separate, but we have these trends, and for maybe more, there's a little bit strong, sometimes rigid, in my opinion, like this brutal approach to magic, let's say. And that's why this kind of discussions always happens about around my channel as well. And I just want to listen and to share and to show different perspectives that also where I come from, probably, because my magic practices are heavily influenced by British occult and by IoT particular, and that's why it's also so sometimes drastically different from what I get as a feedback to my channel. Because I tell sometimes things that people think that it's stupid and ridiculous, that you have to be, if you're magical practitioner, you have to be this super strong, super brutal, and bend the wall to your will, and so on. And also what I think I see in you particular, that you care a lot about society, and you do a lot of magic which is targeting like to improve society, to improve some social processes and some political processes and so on. And that's what I also particularly interested. I don't know even how to form that question. but sometimes I meet a lot of opinions that how is it like correct to try to influence these world processes by our magical actions?
Well, this is another complex question, but it also relates back to, you talked about asking me what my current magical interests are. Well, this is one that's been going for a long time, this sort of working on things to live in a better world. Because I think, to me, all of magic all of what I do magic for is about living a better life. And obviously you need to eat, you need a roof over your head, you need a community of people, you need, people to love and that love you back. You need all of these things. But also we need to, I want to live in a world which is better, less destructive, less stupid than the current world order. And so I do some spells towards that. To me, it's just an expansion of the natural need to do magic, to live a better life, to live in a better world.
I agree, and for me that was a little bit maybe new concept somehow. I don't know why. I mean, I share this concept with you now, and I think you have influenced me as well in that way. But somehow, yeah, I didn't, and I don't see that kind of public discussions that very often, maybe, about how magicians can improve our world, and how can we make our society live a better, safer life, and so on. There is like some on the places, there are some small discussions comes up now and then, but there is no this current. I wouldn't say so, is it? Or am I wrong? Is there any current of that kind of approach?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's there's a couple of 2 or 3 books that I'm aware of that are out there about doing. There's one called Magical Resistance or something. Phil Hine did a book a year or 2 ago about the history of his involvement and other people's involvement with kind of anarchist projects magically and things like
But
that.
still, it's still quite relatively small, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, magic is relatively small. I think it's it's only a few people in a million that actually are really serious about magic. I think it's a tiny, tiny
But
minority.
even inside the magical society, it's not the big current.
Quite possibly, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm going on just looking at social media. There are a few magicians that post quite a bit about what we could or should be doing to make things better in the world. And some of them occasionally launch group efforts, like there's getting people to do sigils for a particular thing on one particular Friday of the month or something like that. I've heard of people doing that. So that does exist out there. I mean, I don't know how effective these things are when it's groups of people that aren't really experienced magicians. Maybe they are effective. It's just a numbers
I
thing.
think I would say they are effective. I've been participating in a few rituals. Well, I will not be able to talk about it out loud, maybe, which I definitely know did affect certain
Okay.
things.
Cool. These were online rituals with using.
No, yeah, they were online rituals. Yes, they were online rituals with few. It's completely in Eastern Europe, but yeah, it absolutely.
Right, yeah. No, I agree. It's a small thing, but I think it's actually a growing thing in the magical, the different magical communities. I think I'm seeing more of that now. The other day, I saw an advert on Blue Sky for a T-shirt that, what did it actually say? It was something like "Hex the Nazis" or something. It's obviously just something somebody's selling to make money, but also to get a meme out there. The idea that we should be hexing people whose politics we find disgusting.
That's cool. Let's do that. But I don't think that there is such a discussion in Russian speaking area, or I don't think I come across ever in the public. I mean, I know there is undercurrent for sure because I've been participating in few, but there is no public discussion about it, and it feels like a little bit not of course prohibited, but somehow there is some stigma. Like if you're a magician, that just do your own will, and that's it. Like everything is like just around you and what you are doing. So you shouldn't go there protect something, or like it's like too much. You're thinking too much of yourself if you believe that you know better what it should be done in the world, because we are all this super high consciousness and whatever. But
Okay.
I would like to maybe push it a little bit forward. Maybe sometimes start that kind of discussion. Actually, we can do that, and it's effective. If you do effective magic and a group magic in total, like trying to fix what we don't like, it might work.
Well, yeah, yeah. I think you have to be careful to trust the people you're working with.
That's
I
for
mean,
sure.
yeah, I mean, you can do a minor sort of spell. Like, let's all do a sigil for something this weekend and put that out on Facebook or WhatsApp or X or whatever, and sort of like that, do something with that. And you're not really very exposed then, and it's not really that much interaction going on. It may still be a good thing, but if you want to do anything really intense, I think you have to be really sure of the people you're working with. I wouldn't want to talk about some of my workings, my group workings, in any public forum. I'd only want to talk about them with people I work with magically.
I agree. I also will not do that, but just to discuss that possibility, I would say that like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like this idea of magical resistance and so on. I mean, that's I could join that club for sure.
Mhm.
But yes. Also, how much time do you have? I mean, we could soon finish, but I want to like last question, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, a couple more questions. Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Uh, it's quite often question sounds like, where if you just came into a magic, Where actually do you start?
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry, I know this is it's a horrible question.
The world has changed so much since I started. I mean, my introduction to being a serious magician and joining a group and things like that came as a result of sitting in a coffee shop in 1979, kind of like at a sort of public meeting. So that was the kind of thing that doesn't happen anymore. It's all done online these days, so it's very different. I would say, look, have a good look around at what is on offer, which of course there's two ways to do that. Obviously, there's the online world, social media and so forth, and there's bookshops. And though, there's still going to be your main sources of information. So have a look around at what's going on, but bear in mind that just because you like, say, the ideology of a particular group doesn't mean you need to be joining that group. Have a look at the people involved as well. And that's how come I ended up joining the Rune Guild. It's not because I was interested, very much interested in the runes, but I joined because I met Ian and Ingrid and they were really excellent people. And I thought, okay, the quality people in the Rune Guild. So that drew me towards it. So I think it's a case of communicating with people and finding out where your heart reaches out, where you think, yes, these are my people. And that's the best starting point. You can get loads of reading done in the meantime, but yeah, find the others, as they say.
That's so cool. I mean, that's for me, it's quite an unusual suggest, but I love it. I would say my path start. Well, it was in a family, so I had my mom as
Yeah.
that person. But yeah, it was a few groups for me, but I wouldn't say that I start immediately with a good group. I've been through few groups which I wouldn't recommend.
Mm.
And it's also quite a thing, yes. So that's exactly your advice. It's very handy there. At first, not the idea of the group, but what are the people there?
Mm.
It's really much more important than what they represent. When I joined this group, when I began in my magical journey, the idea of the groups were cool, but the people there weren't. And I would say that yes, that the instrument, the tradition, the approach in magic, it's never the main thing, in my opinion. So because anyway, you have such a long journey in front of you that you might change your tradition and views on magic and instruments, anything. It doesn't really matter where you start, to be honest.
No, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So just go, and yes, if you feel that there is something you can grasp and like you can lean on some people with that, yes, if you like the people, then yeah, I would say that's much more important than whatever knowledge they bring. You can gain your own knowledge, but the experience, the connection, the support, and that's the thing. Yeah, I agree totally. And I agree totally, even though I didn't think about that approach. Okay, do you want to have some to tell some say some words to my channel? You're gonna be watched by totally entirely Russian speaking population in magic, so do you have any expectation from that field?
Well,
Do you have any opinion? Let's say
about
about Russian speaking occult. I don't know.
well, you see, I know next to nothing about the Russian speaking occult world. I just hope that I hope that I've communicated something useful to you Russian speakers out there. Yeah.
For sure, definitely. I also hope that I will do a good job with subtitles, that your communication will be really readable. I hope so. But thank you so much that you visited my
You're
channel.
welcome.
Maybe if we got some specific questions and so on, maybe we can do someday again, something like that. More specific dive into some certain subject, if you
Sure.
don't
Yeah.
mind. Because Dave made like you also teach chaos magic. I mean, you made recently a course in 8 colors of magic.
Yes, yeah, I've done some online courses, some video-based courses, which are just, you know, there you can go to, and also occasionally, very occasionally, some live online courses. Yeah.
Yeah, but you give me your resources, I put them there, and of course, so I also been on that course in 8 colors of magic on Patreon. So I highly recommend if you want to know the basics, how it goes, and everything. Because sometimes it's difficult for me, particularly. It was a difficult point to find a point where do I start to learn to study chaos magic, actually. And I would say your course is giving directions.
Oh, great.
So you understand the concept and you can continue from that. So yes.
Oh, yeah.
What?
My main outward facing links is Linktree. You've probably got. I can send you my Linktree.
Yeah, send me your link tree. That
Yeah.
would be easy.
My website's a mess at the moment. It needs a lot of work on it, but you know the Linktree will guide you to other things. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Дэйва